There is a category of maritime crime that occupies an unusual legal and operational space, one that is neither war nor piracy in the classical sense, but that combines elements of both in a way that forces responding navies to navigate law, politics, and force simultaneously. The seizure of commercial vessels by state actors using the machinery of a Coast Guard or a Navy to board, detain, and redirect a ship that has no legal connection to any dispute between the seizing state and any other party is a category of action that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Navy had refined into a systematic instrument of coercive diplomacy across the preceding decade. The seizures followed a pattern, a pretext. The vessel had entered Iranian territorial waters, or had violated some regulation that the IRGCN asserted applied to it, or was connected to some party that Iran characterized as having unpaid obligations. That provided legal cover for an action that was, in its operational execution, indistinguishable from state-sponsored seizure of a commercial vessel in international waters. The MV Damavand Star was a Maltese-flagged chemical tanker, 23,000 tons, carrying a cargo of naphtha from Fujairah to a refinery in Oman. Her route took her through the southern approaches to the Strait of Hormuz, across the Gulf of Oman, and into the Gulf of Aden. She had no Iranian cargo. She had no Iranian ownership. She had no connection to any dispute that Iran had asserted in any forum. Her crew of 24 included citizens of the Philippines, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and one British national, the chief officer. She was flying the Maltese flag, registered with the International Maritime Organization, fully compliant with all international documentation requirements, and operating on a route that she had transited many times before. At 7:14 on a Wednesday morning, an IRGCN patrol boat had approached her from the north while she was in the open waters of the Gulf of Oman, 67 nautical miles south of the Iranian coast and 61 nautical miles north of the Omani coast. International waters by any measurement. The patrol boat's crew had fired warning shots across the tanker's bow and ordered her captain by radio to halt his vessel. When the captain complied, an IRGCN boarding party of 12 had come aboard from the patrol boat and had directed the vessel at gunpoint to alter course north toward Iranian waters, specifically toward the anchorage at Bandar Abbas. The distress alert had been transmitted at 7:31 after the IRGCN boarding party had secured the bridge. The British chief officer had managed to activate the vessel's SSAS, Ship Security Alert System, before the boarding party had taken full control of the communications equipment. The alert had gone to the vessel's management company in Malta, which had transmitted it to the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center in Dubai and to Fifth Fleet. By 7:47, the full picture had been assembled. An IRGCN seized commercial vessel, 24 crew members under armed guard, course altered north toward Bandar Abbas, speed 11 knots. The response had been immediate. The United States Navy destroyer closest to the Damavand Star's last reported position had been diverted from its patrol route at 7:49, with a tasking that was as clear as any the commanding officer had received. Intercept the seized vessel before it reaches Iranian territorial waters, assess the situation, and take appropriate action to ensure the safety of the crew. It was a Wednesday. The time was 9:22 local. The Gulf of Oman was running with a light easterly swell, the morning clear, visibility 15 miles. An Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer was making 28 knots on a course that her navigator had plotted at 7:51, aimed at the intercept position that placed her ahead of the Damavand Star's northbound track, ahead of the tanker's course, between the vessel and the Iranian territorial water boundary that began 12 nautical miles from the Iranian coast. The geometry was the first problem. The tanker had been seized at 7:14 and had been moving north at 11 knots since approximately 7:35, when the boarding party had taken control of the helm. The destroyer's intercept course had been established at 7:51, 37 minutes after the seizure, 16 minutes after the distress alert. The gap needed to close. At 28 knots on the intercept course, the destroyer's navigation team projected interposition between the tanker and the territorial water boundary in approximately 94 minutes, with approximately 14 nautical miles of international water remaining before the tanker crossed into Iranian territorial waters. 14 miles of working room. But the second problem appeared on the radar display at 9:19, 3 minutes before this story begins. The ESM suite had been tracking the emissions from 2 contacts to the north. Surface contacts bearing 012 and 035 from the destroyer's current position. Since 8:47, when they had appeared at the edge of the detection range and had been tentatively classified as IRGCN fast patrol boats moving south. By 9/11, the classification had been upgraded to high confidence, 2 Blade Runner-type fast attack craft, speeds 38 knots, on convergent courses toward the tanker's position, not from Bandar Abbas, from a position that suggested they had been pre-positioned in the international waters of the Gulf of Oman before the seizure had occurred, waiting for exactly this development. Pre-positioned. The seizure had been planned. The boarding party, the patrol boat, the 2 fast attack craft moving south to provide cover. This was a coordinated operation, not an opportunistic harassment. At 9:22, the commanding officer stood at the Combat Information Center display and read the picture with the precision that the situation demanded. The tanker was at 22 miles, course north, speed 11 knots, moving toward the territorial water boundary. The 2 IRGCN fast boats were at 17 miles on converging courses. Their speed and heading placing them between the destroyer and the tanker in approximately 23 minutes. The territorial water boundary was 31 miles north of the tanker's current position at the rate it was covering ground. 3 elements, 3 timelines, 1 geometry problem. What is the frigate status? She asked. The intelligence officer had been tracking the ESM picture across the fuller Gulf of Oman operating area since the intercept tasking had arrived. IRGCN frigate, assessed Sahand class, departed Bandar Abbas at 0811 ma'am. Current position bearing 008, range 39 miles, speed 18 knots, course 175. She is inbound. Projected intercept with the tanker's position in approximately 67 minutes. The frigate, a Mauj class, the IRGCN's most capable surface combatant, anti-ship missiles, surface-to-air missiles, a gun mount, departing Bandar Abbas at 8:11, 57 minutes after the seizure. The response force had been staged in advance as well. The boarding party, the pre-positioned fast boats, the frigate departure, timed to arrive on scene before the international community's response could be fully established. She looked at the full picture. A seized tanker with 24 crew members aboard, 2 fast boats positioning between the destroyer and the tanker, a frigate inbound from Bandar Abbas with 67 minutes to the scene, the territorial water boundary 31 miles north and closing at 11 knots. "Everything begins with the crew," she said. 24 people on that vessel are the mission. Everything else is geometry to be managed. She keyed the radio at 9:27, channel 16, and the IRGCN guard frequency. IRGCN boarding party aboard the MV Damavand Star, and all IRGCN vessels in the Gulf of Oman operating area. This is a United States Navy warship. You have seized a Maltese-flagged commercial vessel in the international waters of the Gulf of Oman, at a position that is 67 nautical miles south of Iranian territorial waters. This seizure is without legal basis under international law. The vessel was in international waters, conducting a lawful transit at the time of boarding. We are requiring you to release the vessel and its crew immediately. We are inbound to the vessel's position. All your movements and communications are being recorded and transmitted to Commander, United States Fifth Fleet, and to the governments of Malta, the United Kingdom, and all nations whose citizens are among the vessel's crew. Release the vessel. The transmission established the legal and operational record. Release was demanded. The legal basis was stated. The audience was named. Every subsequent IRGCN action took place against that established record. No response from the IRGCN on Channel 16. The 2 fast boats had now separated their approach geometry. The ESM suite was tracking both contacts. They were not converging on the same intercept point. One was taking a position between the tanker and the destroyer on the western arc. The other was taking a position on the eastern arc. Between them, they were attempting to establish a physical screen across the destroyer's approach corridor. 2 fast boats, high speed, positioned to intercept or shadow any attempt by the destroyer to close directly on the tanker. At sea, distance is language. And 2 fast boats at 38 knots, establishing a screen between a destroyer and a seized tanker with 24 crew members aboard, was a sentence whose meaning was clear, deliberate, and operational. She made the decision at 9:31. MH-60R airborne. Fly directly to the tanker. Position overhead the vessel at 500 feet and establish continuous visual and FLIR coverage of the bridge and the deck. I want the boarding party's armed posture recorded in real time. I want the crew's status assessed and transmitted every 5 minutes. The helicopter does not engage. It observes and documents, and it lets the boarding party know they are being watched. The MH-60R was airborne at 9:33. The helicopter was faster than any surface vessel. It crossed the intervening distance to the tanker in approximately 9 minutes, arriving overhead at 0942 and immediately establishing its position at 500 feet. The FLIR rotating through its coverage arc and feeding the image to the destroyer's CIC via data link. The FLIR image at 0942 showed the tanker's bridge. 3 members of the boarding party visible on the bridge wing, 2 of them armed with assault rifles. The ship's original crew was not visible on the deck. The vessel's course was unchanged. Still north, still 11 knots, still heading toward the territorial water boundary. At 9:44, the fast boat on the western arc attempted to intercept the helicopter's approach line, not to shoot at it, but to position below the helicopter's operating altitude in a way that the pilot interpreted as an attempt to fly the helicopter off its observation position through proximity harassment. The pilot maintained position, logged the fast boat's movement toward the helicopter's position, the commanding officer said. Time and bearing. That is an attempt to disrupt the observation of the crew of a seized vessel. It goes into the record. At 9:47, she transmitted a second message. IRGCN boarding party aboard Damavand Star. Your boarding party members are visible on the bridge wing carrying weapons. We have United States Navy personnel overhead who can see every person on this vessel. We are documenting the armed posture of your boarding party and the condition of the vessel's crew. We have established communication with the vessel's management company and with the governments of all crew member nationalities. The international community is watching this vessel. Release the crew and allow the vessel to resume its lawful course. Crew member nationalities, management company, international community watching. The message was a legal and diplomatic instrument, establishing that the IRGCN boarding party's actions were visible to audiences beyond the immediate tactical situation, to governments with citizens aboard, to the vessel's management company with its own legal obligations, to the international framework that the IRGCN's shore authority would have to manage the consequences of. At 9:53, something on the tanker changed. The flyer image showed movement on the bridge. The boarding party members who had been visible on the bridge wing withdrew inside the bridge structure. 30 seconds later, the tanker's engine note changed, audible to the helicopter crew through their audio feed from the deck sensors, and the vessel's speed began to reduce from 11 knots to 9 knots to 7. The tanker was slowing. In the CIC, the Surface Warfare Coordinator updated the geometry. The slowing tanker was changing the timing of every element in the picture. At 7 knots instead of 11, the time to the territorial water boundary extended from the previous projection. The destroyer's interposition timeline improved. The frigate's arrival geometry shifted slightly. She did not celebrate the deceleration. She kept watching. At 9:58, the fast boat on the eastern arc altered course abruptly, turning southwest, away from the tanker's position, its speed unchanged at 38 knots, but its course now taking it away from the developing geometry rather than into it. The western fast boat held position for 90 seconds before it also turned. South, not southwest, a different departure course, but a departure nonetheless. Both fast boats were withdrawing. The MH-60R pilot reported the fast boat departures at 10:01. In the CIC, the commanding officer watched the contact's course vectors update on the tactical display. Both moving away, both at high speed. Neither had fired, neither had physically interfered with the helicopter. They had established their presence, had attempted the screen position, and now they were leaving the geometry. "Why are they withdrawing?" she asked the intelligence officer. The helicopter overhead, the tanker is the answer, ma'am. The boarding party on the vessel is watching an MH-60R at 500 feet that is recording everything they do. The fast boat's withdrawal may have been directed from the boarding party, a calculation that the IRGCN's international exposure was increasing with every minute of the helicopter's observation. Or it may have been a command-level decision from Bandar Abbas. She nodded without responding to the analysis. She was already thinking about the frigate. Still inbound, still 41 miles north, still 53 minutes to the scene at her current speed. At 10:04, the tanker's speed reduced further to 4 knots, then to 2. Then, at 10:07, the vessel came to a stop. The engine noise, audible on the helicopter's audio feed, was the sound of a vessel at idle. Not a breakdown, a deliberate stop. She transmitted immediately. A Damavand Star. This is the United States Navy. We see you have stopped. We are closing your position. We are sending a boarding assistance team. Stand by. She had the legal authority. The vessel was in international waters. The vessel's crew was under armed guard. The vessel was stopped. The conditions that permitted the assertion of authority to approach and render assistance were clearly met. Prepare the visit board search and seizure team, she said. I want them on the RHIB and ready to launch the moment we are within range. The helicopter will continue overhead coverage throughout. The VBSS team's mission is crew assessment and crew safety. They are not going to the tanker to engage the boarding party. They are going to see the crew and to make the boarding party's position in front of international witnesses visible and documented. The RHIB was in the water at 10:18. The VBSS team of 8 Navy personnel in their equipment, the small boat turning toward the tanker at high speed with the destroyer following at 800 meters and the helicopter maintaining its overhead position. At 10:22, the MH-60R pilot reported new movement on the tanker's bridge. The boarding party emerging from the bridge structure, gathering on the bridge wing, watching the approaching RHIB, armed, but not in firing posture. At 10:26, the RHIB came alongside the tanker's pilot ladder. The VBSS team leader's voice came over the radio circuit. Damavand Star, this is United States Navy boarding assistance. We are coming aboard to verify crew safety. We have a right of access under international maritime law to assess the condition of a distressed vessel in international waters. We are not armed with intent to engage. We are here for the crew. 31 seconds of silence on the radio. Then, from the tanker, a voice in Farsi accented English. You may come aboard. The VBSS team was on the tanker's deck at 10:29. Within 12 minutes, the team leader's voice came back on the circuit. All 24 crew confirmed present and accounted for. No serious injuries. Crew is confined to mess deck, physically unhurt. Boarding party is still aboard. 12 personnel, armed. Boarding party leader has indicated they are awaiting instructions from Bandar Abbas. Awaiting instructions. The frigate was now 31 miles north and closing. The IRGCN boarding party was on the vessel awaiting orders. The VBSS team was aboard with the crew. The helicopter was overhead. The destroyer was 800 meters off the tanker's beam. At 10:47, the boarding party leader emerged from the interior of the vessel and spoke to the VBSS team leader on the deck. The VBSS team leader transmitted the exchange immediately. Boarding party leader says they have received instructions to transfer back to their patrol boat. They are leaving the vessel. At 10:51, the 12-member IRGCN boarding party descended the pilot ladder to their patrol boat, which had returned to the tanker's position from a holding point to the northwest. The patrol boat's engines came to life, and it moved away from the tanker's hull, course northwest, speed 22 knots. The Damavand Star was free of armed personnel at 10:53. The commanding officer transmitted at 10:54. Fifth Fleet, this is the destroyer. Damavand Star boarding party has disembarked. All 24 crew confirmed safe. Vessel in international waters, engines available. Crew is resuming bridge watch. We will escort the vessel to safe waters. IRGCN frigate is at 23 miles north and appears to have reduced speed. Current assessed speed 8 knots and reducing. Full reconstruction package follows. She looked at the tactical display. The frigate at 23 miles. Its speed profile showing a vessel that had received an order to reduce, to slow, to hold. The shore command at Bandar Abbas, having decided that the boarding party's withdrawal and the presence of an American VBSS team aboard the vessel had changed the operational calculus sufficiently that the frigate's continued approach served no purpose that was worth the escalation it would represent. The frigate came to a stop at 10:58, 18 miles north of the tanker's position, sitting dead in the water, its engines at idle. It held that position for 22 minutes before turning north at 11:20 and beginning its return to Bandar Abbas. The destroyer escorted the Damavand Star southwest for 3 hours and 40 minutes until the tanker was in the open waters of the Arabian Sea, where the IRGCN's operational profile was substantially reduced. The tanker's captain resumed his original course for the Omani refinery at 14:33. The commanding officer composed the full reconstruction package at 14:47. Timeline from seizure at 07:14 to crew liberation at 10:53. 3 hours and 39 minutes. Key decision points. Helicopter deployment at 09:31. VBSS team launch at 10:18. Boarding party disembarkation at 10:51. The fast boat withdrawal. Both boats departed the scene before the VBSS team went aboard, their departure attributed to the helicopter's sustained overhead observation of the boarding party's armed posture. The frigate departed Bandar Abbas at 08:11, pre-staged for cover, reduced speed after boarding party withdrawal began, stopped at 18 miles at 10:58, returned north at 11:20. The entire operation was pre-planned. Boarding party, pre-positioned fast boats, staged frigate. The timeline and geometry confirm a coordinated operation authorized at a level above the patrol boat's commanding officer. She paused. The SSAS activation by the chief officer at 0731 was the enabling event. Without that alert, the Damavand Star would have reached Iranian territorial waters before we were on scene. 16 minutes from alert to Fifth Fleet tasking. That alerting chain performed. She set down her notes. 24 crew members are going home. That is the only number that matters tonight. The Gulf of Oman held the record of what had passed through it on this Wednesday. The Damavand Star continued south. Somewhere north, the IRGCN frigate was returning to Bandar Abbas, with its mission incomplete and its shore command in possession of a specific data point about the American response architecture. From distress alert to helicopter overhead, the timeline was 1 hour and 15 minutes. From helicopter overhead to boarding party withdrawal, the timeline was 11 minutes. Those numbers would be studied. The response architecture would be adapted. And the next time, the calculus would be different. But on this Wednesday, 24 people who had been under armed guard on a seized vessel in the Gulf of Oman were free.